But what I don't feel is going into that camp, it, whose job is it to pick the sparring partners and to have that stuff on point?
Derrick, he the teacher, right?
It's interesting listening to you say that obviously then you say his father said, hey, no sparring here. Because in the interview, I remember Andre Ward was saying, that's wild. You mean to tell me you had no sparring partners?
Right.
And whose job was that? And he said, Derrick James is the coach, right? Is it so in the past? And was it your job to make sure that you secure sparring partners for him for all of his fights?
No. I never, any other fighters that I train will tell you, I never get their sparring. Because what do you understand? PBC has a roster of fighters. So they have a Rolodex thicker than mine, which I don't even have one. So they will pick particular sparring partners and I'll okay them, but I'm not getting them. I'm not looking for them. I'm not doing any of that.
Bro, so let's get one thing clear here. What Derrick James just did today, the interview, what he just spoke about with Brian Custer on The Last Stand, he just cleared himself from being the main reason on why Errol Spence Jr. had such a horrible camp leading up to the Terence Bud Crawford fight, ladies and gentlemen. We all knew that there was an injury given to Errol Spence Jr. within training camp from Quentin Randall. Body shot. But in that interview that Errol Spence Jr. did about 2-3 weeks ago, did over 500,000 views, pushed a narrative that leading up to that training camp, not having 6 weeks of sparring before the fight took place, not having the right sparring partners, saying you would have thought that Derrick James would have at least been throwing punches at me while we're doing the mids, at least been throwing some punches at me. He wasn't even doing that. I had no southpaw sparring partners. I had nobody to spar with.
Bro, like I didn't spar probably like what, 6 weeks? Yeah, like 6, 7 weeks. Like I didn't no sparring, like it was just a lot of stuff that went wrong in that camp. Like even like before that, like the sparring partners, like the guys didn't fit. I ain't had no southpaws in there to spar, none of that. Like it was all out of whack.
Whose job is it to pick the sparring partners and to have that stuff on point?
Derrick, he the teacher, right?
So when you're not sparring, what are you saying to him?
I mean, we just working the miss. The whole time, you just working miss. Like, you would think he would put on some gloves and have me, like, blocking shots and, like, not, but it was none of that.
I'm getting whooped right now. Nah, man, that's crazy.
Yeah, during that interview, did not bring up the fact that the man was injured. And that's the reason why there was no sparring going down leading up to that fight with Terence Bud Crawford. Derrick James exposes Errol Spence Jr. and his lies today on this interview. Derrick James explained the real story. Says 2 weeks in to training camp, yes, the man gets hurt. Actually wasn't the first one to find out about this. It seemed Errol Spence felt this injury, talked to his pops about it, and then eventually had to speak to Mr. Derrick James. Errol Spence was crying about the sparring, not having 6 weeks of sparring leading up to the fight. It was pushing this narrative about Derrick James. But Derrick James said, yes, they were sparring up to 2 weeks. The man got hurt. We have 3 sparring sessions a week. We usually skip every other day. And when Errol Spence Jr. let me know that the man got hurt, that we took a day off from sparring to give the man a little break and then give him some more sparring a few days later to see how he felt. Derrick James says that Errol Spence Jr. stepped in there. Things didn't go that great, stepped out. And his father, Errol Spence Jr.'s father, went up to Derrick James and told him they will not be sparring. So Errol Spence Jr. says he had no sparring partners. None of them were southpaws. I did no sparring. It was because your father told Derrick James and you were injured, but you don't want to put it out there. Ladies and gentlemen, Derrick James comes out and says he was the one that told Errol Spence Jr. to take that cortisone shot. If you weren't going to pull out of the fight or you weren't going to extend the fight, which Derrick James says that he had an opportunity to do that within the contract, could have extended it for 3 months. But Errol Spence Jr. just wanted to get in there. Who cares on how the man was feeling? Derrick James explains that he was having to do 14, sometimes 16 round mitts where Errol Spence Jr., due to the no sparring, was getting it in and throwing punches at him. Doing exactly what Errol Spence Jr. said he didn't do. So who's lying here? Ladies and gentlemen, Derrick James gives his side of the story. He even says he doesn't even know what the hell is going down with Errol Spence Jr. In my opinion, I respect Errol the True Spence Jr. immensely. I do. He's a warrior inside the ring and outside the ring. But the fact that they try to push this narrative on Derrick James and then Derrick James comes out and gives us the true story, what Errol Spence Jr. should have did when he was on that podcast with Andre Ward was he should have said it wasn't Derrick James's fault. But that's how my training camp went. By the way, Derrick James saying that the man, it's not even his job to get sparring partners. It's not even his job to get sparring partners. Completely shutting down what Errol Spence Jr. had to say when he said, you know, when Andre Ward was like, well, whose job is it to have everything on point and to get these sparring partners and everything? Errol Spence Jr. said it was Derrick James. Y'all had fought your whole career together, Errol Spence Jr. So y'all, you're going to tell me that Derrick James is lying about that? Because if Derrick James is lying, of course Errol Spence Jr. is going to come out and argue this, ladies and gentlemen. Errol Spence Jr. is going to be like, you got all my other sparring partners for all my other fights. But if Derrick James is telling the truth, then that means that Errol Spence Jr. and his team, the people, PBC, whoever it is that Derrick James says is finding these sparring partners, that it's them finding them. And it's not Derrick James. He says that is not his job. What he does, he just gives the okay that people bring sparring partners to him and that he just gives them the okay. So Errol Spence Jr. tried to flip-flop and push this whole narrative against Derrick James, and Derrick James just came out today and absolutely shut it down. What it sounds like to me is it's Errol Spence Jr. and his father's fault for telling Derrick James, we ain't going to be sparring. We got an injury. We can't spar. That ain't Derrick James's fault. That there ain't sparring partners. Y'all's the one who said it. Ladies and gentlemen, my goodness. Derrick James comes out today, and if it's all the truth, If it's all the truth, then the man just absolutely exposed Errol Spence Jr. And, you know, Errol Spence Jr. on that podcast with Andre Ward pushed a lot of different types of narratives. Derrick James just hit him all today. And it seems like, I don't know, man, Derrick James is a very believable man. But it's up to you who you want to believe. Let me know in the comments what y'all think about this, man. Derrick James responding to Errol Spence Jr. and his 500 million viewed interview with Andre Ward. My goodness, ladies and gentlemen, I'm out.